We continue our series of interviews with candidates for Boston City Council. Our guest is competing to succeed Mark Siomo as the councilor for Allston-Brighton's District 9. We'd like to welcome Brandon Bowser. Thank you very much for being with us, Brandon.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
First of all the candidates running this year, you're the only one who ran against Mark Siomo 2 years ago. So remind us, how did that turn out?
Oh, it was a great race. We ran a very positive campaign. We turned out about 39% of the general election.
So why did you run against someone, here's an incumbent, he didn't seem to be in a whole lot of trouble, he raised a whole lot more money than you did, so why did you run against him?
Well, I was approached by a number of community members and young activists saying, hey, Brandon, I think that you do really good at this job. I think that you're the right fit for the job. So I challenged Mark, and I feel very positive about the outcome.
What about being a fit? You're a school teacher. You wouldn't be the first school teacher on the city council, but other than that, what makes you a good counselor?
Well, I think as a teacher, the role of a teacher really is to take a bunch of opinions and try to synthesize that in a way that makes sense for the most people. And I think that's really the core role of a city councilor, is to take a bunch of opinions, a bunch of voices, and then put that in a clear and cohesive message. And that's what representatives do.
What about neighborhood activism, involvement with the arts? Anything to say about that?
Well, since last election, I dug deeper. I became an executive board member of the Allston Civic Association, and I was very instrumental in widening involvement in that and breaking down some barriers of entry. I've been working with Artist Impact, which I heard Olivia Dang on your program the other day talking about that. They're doing amazing work organizing artists, and I've also been working with CPA money, Community Preservation Act money, trying to find different projects in the neighborhood that we could plug in applications for to really better our public spaces and park spaces.
Well, I wasn't surprised on your website to see you have a lot to say about housing. One of the problems in this neighborhood, of course, is in many parts of the city, the price of housing is going way up, whether you're a renter or a buyer. So what should be done about that?
Well, I'll say this, it's a full-blown crisis in the district and across the city. We need to make sure that all new development that comes in is being done in a respectful way. And I think we talked about this last time, and we've had some growth, but I think all new development coming in should be at least at the bare minimum 20% affordability, and then also mix in mixed income housing to make sure that people who live in our neighborhood can afford new development. Because it's so far from what I've seen, the majority of the projects are not for the neighborhood, or really for median income of the city of Boston.
Well, for larger developments, the typical set aside for affordable units right now is about 13%. There are some groups around the city who want to see that go up to 1/3. Should it go that far?
I think so. I think that there's a strong coalition of community organizers, of people fighting around this inclusionary development amount. And I think that we should be reaching for the skies. So when it comes down to it, we can have respectful development done in a way that at least 20%. If it's 33%, that's great.
It certainly sounds great, but on the other hand, if you're going to have more affordable units and maybe deeper affordability, where's the money for that come from?
Well, I think that there's certain projects, and in my neighborhood, there's a new project which is kind of contentious. It's called the ARX Developers. They're developing actually right around the corner from where I live in Lower Allston or North Allston, depending on what you call it. And they're developing basically cooperative living, or some people call it micro units. So it's 4 units, and you have shared space. So there are people getting outside of the box, and I think we need to be working with CDCs, community development company or corporations, and other nonprofit developers to figure out what kind of development we need. Because there's one activist in the neighborhood, he really strongly believes that the real battle is won on the house-to-house basis.
Well, one way to increase affordability is to decrease the reliance on cars and parking spaces off the street. So what would you like to see done in that direction?
I think streets are the largest amount of public space in our city. And it's really, we're working off of outdated or 20th century models. So let me just throw some numbers at you. About 80% of Allston-Brighton either walks, takes the T, or bikes around. A third rely on the T every day. And so we need to be really reevaluating how we use our public space, especially roads, for getting people around. If that means expanding bike lanes, I fully support that. If that means building more bike lanes, I 100% support that. But we need to be thinking about this in the broader scheme, connecting different bike lanes to network them so you can get easily around, safer around the neighborhood and around the city on bikes, because that's one of the big barriers is people say it's not safe to ride a bike. And I think we should be making it as accessible and safe for everyone to get around. If they're walking or taking a bus or driving or biking, it needs to be for everyone, not just one mode of transportation.
This has been the news, and we're talking with Brandon Bowser, candidate for City Council in District 9 in Allston-Brighton. Brandon, I want to get into your educational background. I think there are two widely acknowledged problems with the Boston schools right now. Something like a quarter of the high school students don't finish, at least in 4 years. And many of those who do finish, they're not prepared for what's next. What would you do about those problems?
Well, I think that it goes without saying we should be preparing our kids for life after high school. I mean, that's a given, right? If that means Madison Park, preparing them for the trades, and trades are a great option right now. You can make a very healthy living, live a very comfortable life working that. It's hard work, but we should be preparing kids for after school. If that means going to school and continuing in education, I'd love to see partnerships with BU, Harvard, and the other universities around the city to prepare them for what it's actually like. So teaming them up maybe with undergrads or grad students or programs to make sure that they are mentally prepared for life after school.
Should the standards be a bit more challenging, you think?
I mean, rigor is the core of education right now. We are trying to prepare kids to be academically prepared. Oftentimes, there's been a pressure around the country lately, of the last couple decades, to prepare kids for tests. Tests don't really prepare you for life. We need to be giving kids the skills to be academically rigorous with reading, mathematics, technology, and that all goes back to funding. We can't have the proper resources and materials or technology unless the schools are properly funded. And that's how you get kids prepared. You have to give them those resources to succeed and compete with other students around the country and around the region.
I want to ask you about the artist sector in Allston-Brighton. It's been known for that for a long time. Many people assume artists, they stay there for a couple of years and they settle down somewhere else. You must see things differently. How can you keep them from being forced out?
Well, I think that our artist community is a core cultural reality, a part of our neighborhood. It's not the only defining characteristic. We are also an immigrant community and a young community. But it's difficult for people who are artists to work in their craft, work a full-time job, maybe work a part-time job, just to prepare and live and create. So our creative types are very vulnerable, and they're very easily displaced. And for the most part, if you come here for school and you perform and you're an artist in some magnitude, the tendency is to leave to another city. It's on par with rent or cheaper. Providence, Brooklyn even is on par with the rent we see here. Philadelphia, a lot of people are going out to other cities. And there's also pressure regionally in places like Lynn to create artist communities there. So how do we protect those folks? The first thing is advocacy, and I am so grateful for Artist Impact for leading that charge and trying to organize the artist community around development and understanding the community process.
I do want to ask you about one endorsement you've been mentioning from the Greater Boston Labor Council. So if you go knocking on a door, you tell people that, and they say, well, how did you get that?
Well, it's awesome. So it was first endorsed by the Boston Teachers Union, and the Boston Teachers Union and their counterparts with 103, they successfully negotiated a dual endorsement between myself and Dan Daly. And so it's really an accomplishment for labor. It's a win for labor. When you have two candidates that are strong candidates that care deeply about the neighborhood, we're standing together, and hopefully we have a person from labor on the City Council.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Brandon Bowser, candidate for City Council in Allston-Brighton's District 9. We'll have more news in just a moment.